Let me go to Robert Dow from Rail Back on Track. Staffing issues don't seem to be the only issue which are forcing Queensland Rail to cancel services. It seems a lack of trains, actual trains, is also adding to the problem. Robert Dow is quite a well-known commentator, a commuter advocate from Rail Back on Track. You've just heard the Leader of the Opposition, Tim Nicholls. What are your observations about what the opposition's had to say, Robert Dow? Morning to you.
Good morning, Steve. Good morning, listeners. Yeah, we do have some problems with trains. We've identified a train shortage since about 2014, Steve, evidenced by the use of three-car services in the peak on the Ferny Grove and Cleveland lines, for example. And we've seen the number of peak services using three-car trains slowly climb, and it's even gone higher since the introduction of the new or the interim timetable since the opening of the Redcliffe Peninsula line. Now, I listened to both the Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. I want to stay away particularly from the political blame game as well, but the fact is that the LNP did order the new generation trains without guards compartments. So that's one of the reasons why we think that there's problems with the new generation rolling stock trains. I filmed the first NGR train being towed through Goodna on February the 16th, I think it was, this year. Now, that's some time ago. We now have 5 of these new trains out at Walkaracka, and they're still not really running out and about on the network, so there's obviously problems. Now, listeners would know that our network in South East Queensland is set up for assistance to passengers that need it at the central or the core zone of the stations, which is where the guards are on the central position of the train. Now, the new generation trains do not have a guards compartment, and we understand that one of the delays in the new generation trains is that they're trying to modify them a little bit so that the guards can travel at the rear. But this raises all sorts of questions of how this is going to work for people that do need assistance to get on and off on trains. What does it mean that Queensland Rail will have to deploy more staff on those stations where the new generation trains are running, because everything's set up for centre assistance on the platforms when we have guards at the rear of the trains? We've got a real mess on our hands, Steve. We've got a problem. I think it's really incumbent on the Minister to come out and say what the problems are with the NGR trains, because we're hearing all sorts of rumours, some you mentioned, which are really incorrect, because I've actually watched the NGR train move around on the network. There are no problems with platform clearances or anything like that, but there certainly is a problem with the position of the guards, so that needs to be spelt out clearly by the Minister.
This could go on for a couple of years. This could go on for, as I gather from the Minister before, this could go on for years.
Oh, look, clearly. Yeah, we simply do not have enough trains. We don't have enough train crew.
Crikey.
Now, we agree.
Robert, I mean, that's... Wow, I mean, given that all that you've been warning them about, I mean, as a an advocate, you're not even in the QR system.
No, we've been hammering away for years on
Oh, man.
Now,
okay.
the other thing that your caller mentioned, I've just lost me train of thought.
My apologies, sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry. The external drivers. Yes, there is a pool of drivers out there, some currently employed by Horizon and Pacific National, some perhaps recently left those two employers, who are basically qualified on the safety systems and stuff, who could do an accelerated driver program. So I think it's really important that Queensland Rail and the government look around and perhaps take in a direct intake of external drivers, do quick training to help relieve the driver training problem in the short term, and we think that's a pretty sensible thing to do. We understand that there is discussions going on today perhaps to enable that, and that would be a good outcome if that occurred, Steve.
Robert Dow, the opposition have called on Stirling Hinchliffe to resign in the tradition of Westminster accountability. Now, the three most senior people in QR have, or one stood aside, I think, and 2 have resigned. Is that appropriate, or should he stay there like he said, and I'm going to fix the problem? How does Rail Back on Track see things?
Well, we really do think there's been a serious communication issue between QR management, the QR board, and the portfolio and the minister and the shareholding ministers, obviously there's been a complete lack of communication. Now, I don't think it's really up to us to call for the minister's resignation as such. We think that would be probably a little bit counterproductive at this time, because at least the minister is across all the issues and is working very hard on those issues. What we have called for, though, Steve, is we think we need a dedicated minister for public transport at this point. We have a crisis, Steve. It's not only rail. We've got serious issues with the buses. We've got very serious issues with public transport infrastructure, for example, Cross River Rail. We've got the notion of the Brisbane Metro. There's all sorts of really difficult issues for a minister who has multitasked to get across. What we would like to call for is a dedicated minister for public transport. Now, whether that's Minister Hinchcliffe or whatever, but focused on what needs to be done within public transport to get it back on track literally is what we think is really needed at this point. We've been highlighting for years the problems.
Yes, you have.
It was always going to end up in a great big mess, and this is what we've now got, Stephen, sadly. It's the travelling public that are wearing it. We also think it's appropriate for some compensation for the travelling public, whether that's a couple of free travel weekends or some travel during the week. But these unreliable service cancellations have had an impact on people. People have had to pay money out for extra childcare. Casual workers have lost wages. People have had to pay out taxi fares. It really is becoming difficult for people to rely on public transport in southeast Queensland, sadly.
I appreciate you coming on the program this morning. It does seem to give a lot of, credence to what your lobby group has been saying for a number of years now across both governments. Yes, Steve. We've put the information out there. Anyone can go to our forum and see that we have consistently highlighted these issues for years. Thanks for coming on this morning. Thank you. Robert Dow from Rail Back on Track.